It is a simple mathematical fact that there are now more movies available to watch than ever before, and by this time next week there will be yet still more. The sheer volume of films you can sit down and watch these days is a little mind-boggling if you really stop to think about it. It's this strange modern phenomena of cinema overload that has allowed a lot of really fantastic movies to go largely unnoticed for one reason or another. Maybe the film's posters sucked, or the trailer didn't highlight the film's uniqueness, or the marketing was simply non-existent. Or maybe it just got buried underneath the never-ending slate of blockbuster superhero movies coming out of the woodwork. Regardless of why these films slip through the cracks, all but the most meticulous moviegoers among you have likely missed out on at least a few of these relatively unknown gems. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, back from fighting grizzly bears in Vegas to tell you about 10 amazing movies you probably haven't seen and why you haven't seen them. Number 10, Chef. In between making Marvel lots of money and making Disney even more money, Jon Favreau took a breather from blockbusters to make his most personal and charming movie yet in Chef. It follows a renowned chef stagnating in a top restaurant who clashes with a venomous critic, ends up losing his job, and starting from scratch with a simple food van. You probably haven't seen it because that doesn't really sound very interesting, and it sounds shit. But then you learn that it's actually about Favreau's own frustrations making blockbuster movies, that it has a truly brilliant cast and bags of infectious hearts, and that it has an incredible soundtrack, and it's about the best bit of human propaganda this side of The Martian. And then you realize, yeah, you gotta watch it. It's awesome. Number 9, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. So you probably haven't seen this one because despite the film's absolutely insane 99% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a documentary about sushi isn't the kind of thing you just, stick on. But in all honesty, you really should. An octogenarian restaurateur from Tokyo, Jiro Ono is a man who constantly seeks perfection. To be a good chef to him is not good enough. Even to be great is not good enough. The documentary serves as much more than 90 minutes of food porn, although, to be fair, it's almost impossible to watch scene after scene of beautifully prepared onigiri without feeling your stomach try to literally eat itself. The real story here is how meticulous routine can often yield transcendent results. Jiro is not a flashy man, nor is he particularly interested in presenting himself to the audience with pizzazz. He's a man who will spend 2 hours massaging an octopus if that's what it takes to make an impeccable dish. And there's something awesome about that, and it's weirdly hypnotizing to immerse yourself into that world. Seriously, this one's worth a watch. Number 8, Creep. So I'm guessing you probably haven't seen this, but it stars the TV comedy indie darling Jay Duplass, who co-wrote the film with his director/co-star Patrick Bryce. This clever and occasionally hilarious horror flick was released to a level of cricket chirps that was depressing even for such a micro-budgeted, scary movie. Those who actually knew Duplass from his characters on The League and The Mindy Project weren't ready to see him play someone so, creepy. While even the indie crowd who flocked to Safety Not Guaranteed and The Puffy Chair had an equally difficult time following him on his journey into the darkness. But seriously, here's the thing, you should embrace the darkness. Although the blanket found footage style horror had been kicked around and stretched out even by 2014 when this was released, leave it to Mark Duplass to find another way to enliven this concept. The basic premise involves a videographer answering a Craigslist ad from a dying man who wants to record something of a day in the life/farewell video for his unborn son. From there, we all know how this movie is going to end. That's not going to surprise anyone, but the excellent, twisted black comedy performance from Duplass just might. Number 7, Hachi, A Dog's Tale. So you probably haven't seen this one because if you did happen to be browsing Netflix and you stumbled across the cover art for Hachi, A Dog's Tale, you'd likely assume it was just another one of those cornball, vaguely uplifting family movies they show on the Hallmark channel around Christmas. And even though Hachi initially sets itself up to jump headlong into the schmaltzy territory outlined above, it takes a meaty, truly heart-wrenching swerve around the midway point that turns the story towards an emotional gut punch that you probably didn't see coming. Without giving too much away, the film definitely moves away from the human characters to focus the story on Hachi, and it's done in such a crafty and somewhat tragic way that you don't realize the story's really been about the dog the whole time. This one's actually based on a true story, and there's a real statue of Hachi that I've seen in Shibuya in Japan. Forget about the film even, just the story of the dog is incredible. Definitely check this one out. It'll break your heart, but it's amazing. Number 6, Frailty. So you probably haven't seen this because Bill Paxton's directorial debut got swept under the rug in favor of more mainstream horror movies back in 2002 like Signs and The Ring. Matthew McConaughey had just begun his big free fall into the world of lightweight romantic comedies and didn't have the star power to capture the audience this was intended for. Besides, Frailty is one of those movies that prides itself on being a deep psychological thriller and a slow burner, and we all know the phrase slow burner often translates to sluggish, boring, and aimless mess. But not in this case. Anyone who yearns for a more intense, brooding McConaughey performance that seems like it appeared out of nowhere in 2011 needs to give Frailty a fair shake, as do fans of expertly crafted horror mysteries. There's a lot going on under the surface of Frailty, and it always gives you a little bit of a wink to let you know that, but it never actually shows its hand until the final sequence. Paxton is also a rare delight as the small-town family man who begins righteously slaying all of the evil demons he perceives his neighbours to be. Somehow he manages to steer clear of the typical crazy religious zealot stereotype that so many lesser horror movies eat up like candy. Number 5, Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. Okay, so I can see why you probably haven't seen this one. Look at that title. Look at it. How do those words even function together? What could this string of nonsense possibly mean? If by some cockamamie chance you have seen this, it was probably out of morbid curiosity when you were hopped up on 3 separate types of intoxicants. Okay, so let me just read you the summary for this film and you'll see why you're crazy to not have seen it. An African-American mafia hitman who models himself after the samurai of old finds himself targeted for death by the mob. And come on dude, it's called Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, just watch it. Seriously though, this is a samurai flick that fancies itself, or at least its main character at least, in the mold of all those Kurosawa movies from the 50s, but also throws in every bizarre and dark comedic twist it can. And Forrest Whitaker is a total bird-loving badass. Number 4, Manhunter. As far as cinema's greatest villains go, they don't get much greater than Hannibal Lecter. The character became an icon in wake of the 1991 thriller The Silence of the Lambs, thanks largely to a very theatrical performance from Anthony Hopkins. It's the very definition of definitive. Given Hopkins' synonymy with the part, it's understandable as to why not many people have felt compelled to seek out 1986's Manhunter, which was released 5 years before Silence of the Lambs and starred Brian Cox as Dr. Lecter. Factor in a poor box office haul and a miserly response from critics, and it's easy to see why Manhunter has been ignored by fans of Hannibal the Cannibal. And you know what, that's kind of unfair, because although Manhunter premiered to little fanfare in 1986, it has since been reappraised as a genuinely brilliant thriller, and one that has offered a different take on Harris's novels. Cox is an excellent Hannibal, but the real star of the show has to be Mann's direction. Whereas in Silence, every scene takes on an almost gothic likeness, Manhunter is cold, modern, and brutal. It's up to viewers to decide which version they prefer, but Manhunter is still worth watching all the same. Number 3, Bowfinger. 1999 was a widely prolific year for movies of all genres, so it's understandable why this probably flew under your radar during its brief cinema run. After all, you'd probably already set aside time for The Matrix, Fight Club, The Mummy, American Pie, The Green Mile, The Sixth Sense, American Beauty, Toy Story 2, Austin Powers, and The Blair Witch Project. And even though Bowfinger is by far the greatest example of Eddie Murphy playing multiple characters in the same movie, that wasn't a highlight of its marketing. But Bowfinger is really worth a watch because it is easily among Murphy's top 5 funniest performances of all time. He is that good, and Steve Martin also turns out in his last truly hilarious appearance on the big screen. The crazy storyline of a desperate filmmaker trying to shoot a super low-budget sci-fi movie using a major Hollywood star who doesn't know he's acting in a movie could easily have fallen apart at any moment, which is just one more reason that this is such an outstanding comic feat. It's not just that every scene has at least one laugh-out-loud moment, it's that the whole concept is just so much damn fun. Number 2, Margin Call. If you're wondering why the name doesn't ring a bell despite coming out just a few years ago, it's because everything about Margin Call's promotion, the nondescript poster, the ultra-vague trailer, the sardonic tagline, is enough to make your eyes roll back into your head out of sheer boredom. Here, let me read you the summary and see how excited you get about it. A respected financial company is downsizing, and one of the victims is the risk management division head who was working on a major analysis just when he was let go. His protege completes the study late into the night and then frantically calls his colleagues in about the company's financial disaster he has discovered. Oh my god, it sounds terrible! But actually it's not. It's actually the 12 Angry Men of our generation. No kidding. Spanning just 24 hours and taking place primarily over the course of one long business meeting, Margin Call sucks you into the bureaucratic peril straight away and effortlessly amps up the stakes using nothing but tense dialogue, real-world references, and an insanely good ensemble cast. Number 1. Snowpiercer. Although Snowpiercer was met with instant acclaim upon its release in 2013 and was even a modest success at the box office, the film only had a limited release, and in some territories, including the UK, it didn't even release at all. This was despite the film having a $40 million budget and Chris Evans in the leading role, who had just recently experienced the monumental success of 2012's The Avengers. And while Snowpiercer is based on a comic book, it doesn't feature a single superhero at all. However, despite the lack of superhero costumes, big cosmic set pieces, and post-credit scenes, Snowpiercer is genuinely one of the all-time great comic book movies, and manages to be both salient and visually stunning in equal measure. Set in the far future after an attempt to avert global warming turns Earth into an Arctic hellscape, Snowpiercer follows humanity's survivors who now exist entirely on the Snowpiercer train. It is from here that Bong Joon-ho tells a story that manages to address class warfare as a revolution erupts on the rear of the train. It's pure brilliance and a comic book movie everybody must see.